In section 2.4, another way of finding a quadratic is by using a graphic calculator. And so there's a lot of information that I'm going to go through here on the graphing calculator. Again, you can rewind if you want to review, but the goal here is to input lists into your graphing calculator, graph the lists, and then find an equation, a regression equation that goes through those points, and then use that equation to solve for certain information that the problem asks for. So in this particular problem, we have a list. And so if I go to Stat and Edit, I'm going to enter information into L1 and L2. And this is a table from a problem. And the problem is where L1 is the thickness of ice and L2 is the amount of tons that it can hold. So thickness in inches, tons and pounds that it can hold in terms of on a lake, for example. And if you go ice fishing, you may want to know how much ice it needs to be in order for your 2-ton truck to go out on the ice. So we entered it into the list. Second of all, I want to turn the stat plot on. So it's second y equals. And I'm going to go and hit enter. And you can see that plot 1 is off. I'm going to hit enter to turn it on. It is a scatter plot and it's L1 and L2. This tells the calculator I want you to plot the data. Now, if you go to the y equals, you're going to see that this plot 1 is turned on. The plot 1 is turned on because you just turned it on. Now, if you had an equation in here and you're trying to graph something else that's separate from the plot, it's going to confuse the calculator. It's not going to work. This is the number one reason why students get confused, can't graph. It's because they have a plot turned on. It's very easy to go and turn that off. You just hit enter and it turns off. Enter, it turns on. So, all right, back to the information. I'm going to go to zoom. Now, you have to tell the window which window it should be in. And there's an X min, X max, Y min, Y max. That's how many X's, how many Y's you have. But when you put in a list, there's a shortcut in finding the window. And that is if you go to zoom and you scroll down to number 9, it says zoom stat. That means it's going to zoom the statistics that you entered. So when I hit enter, you're going to see that it automatically fixes the window such that it hits all of those points. That's not always the case. Sometimes you would want to go to your window and change it to make it hit the data that you entered. Generally on graphs, I like to go to zoom 6, which is standard, and that's 10 in each direction. But for the statistics part, zoom 9 is the best approach. And you could also hit number 9 and it'll do the same thing. All right, so there's your equation now, or your data points. Now you want to get an equation from this. And let's just say it's going to be a quadratic. And we're just going to look at the right side of that quadratic. So the equation is found when you quit out of here, you go to stat and calculate. And when you go to stat, calculate, and I want quadratic regression, enter, it's basically telling me that the quadratic regression of list 1 and list 2. When you hit enter, you're going to see that you have an A, B, and a C. If you substitute those in, that is your regression line. Now, you want to use that regression line in the calculator, so there's a way to input that into y equals. If I go to y equals, you have to start at y equals, and I go to vars. So I go to vars, and this is, you just got to remember how to do this. Vars stats over to equation and regression equation. Enter. that fills it right into your y sub 1. And if you graph this, you're going to see that that equation goes right through those points. And it's exact. You're not approximating what that regression line is by rounding. So now there can be a couple of different questions. First of all, the question could say, hey, I have a 4.5 ton truck. How thick does the ice have to be? Remember, y is the amount of tons it can hold. So if you graph that, you're going to see it's going to be the intersection of these two lines. So how do I get intersection? Second, calculate, intersect number 5, and then it's going to give me some prompts. And the prompts are going to say first curve, second curve, estimate. So first curve, enter yes. Second curve, enter yes. And then it says guess, put it close to the intersection point, and it's going to give you that you need 12.56 inches of ice to hold the 4.5 ton truck. The other question that you can have is, for example, what about how much will 22 inches of ice hold? So this is given your x, what's your y? Second, calculate value. And second calculate value says x is what? X is going to be 22 inches. And when you hit that, it's going to give you the amount of tons that it will hold, which is going to be your y value. So we did a lot here. We entered lists. We plotted the lists. Found the regression line. Entered the regression line into y equals. And then we used the regression line to find your x given y, and given your y, find your x.